I had an absolutely monstrous climb with a clog tempo deck that brings out one of the big bad evil cards from previous metas and makes it good again. Let's take a look at Thena Cannonball Tempo. This is the list, and I got it from a player named Fox, who I believe is currently alongside me in the top 10. So there are two people in the top 10 playing this list right now. And one of the things that really struck me about playing against this deck was that I was playing a bunch of, like, Arishem, Loki, very, very obviously powerful and strong things to do. And this deck felt like it was the best possible thing to do into those decks, which is a really interesting spot to be in because a lot of decks play counters to themselves or are not very equipped to deal with something like an early Loki out of Arishem or just a Loki in general in the Loki Wiccan deck. But because this deck focuses so heavily on clog and sort of deterministic lockout game plans, you are able to be legitimately strong into what is otherwise a matchup that basically the entire rest of the metagame seems to struggle with. The reason I think that you are so good into this is actually a card that I have long avoided playing because it's very hard for me to play. Luckily, this deck makes it easy. That card is Titania. Now, this 1/5 is an unbelievable clog tool because whenever you have an opponent with two cards in a lane, you can play her alongside a Green Goblin and absolutely clog them up. That is your method of winning. Your job here is, since we no longer have Professor X, you do one lane with the Titania Clog and the other lane with a Cannonball. That is what's happening here. You have Debris Titania. You have White Widow Titania. You have Green Goblin Titania. You have Acid Arrow Titania. All of these cards combine with Titania to create a situation where your opponent absolutely cannot win the game. From there, winning is as simple as cannonballing a different lane. The only thing that gets in your way is Eliath, and that is kind of literally it in terms of stuff that can stop you. Now, why is this deck well positioned now? Why am I doing this now? Well, I think that's actually due to outside factors. This is a deck that has been around for a while. It hasn't always been this strong. And there are two reasons why it's this strong right now. Number one, the nerf to Nocturne, bringing her down to 3/4, combined with the release of cards like Speed and Copycat, have removed a lot of the ability of these decks to prevent themselves from getting clogged with low effort investment by playing a card like Nocturne. Similarly, the release of Kate Bishop has pushed Jeff out of many of the decks that he otherwise would just be a free slot in because Kate Bishop is at least comparable, if not better than, Jeff. Then, of course, there is the ever-present Kitty Pryde, which is in a lot of decks still, but not nearly as many as it used to be. So we end up with the biggest and best counterplay to this deck being mostly out of the metagame. Nocturne is almost nowhere to be seen. Everyone is just playing bigger threes. Jeff is being seen less, and Kitty is being seen less. This means that you are much more able to rely on your lockdown Titania game plan actually just straight up working every single time, because there are very few decks that actually can deal with this in a meaningful way. Annihilus is not even really seen nearly as much as well, and so you end up with like probably the four best cards against this strategy: Annihilus, Nocturne, Jeff, Kitty Pryde, all hitting like rough nadirs in play rate at about the same time, which allows a deck like this to succeed. Now, this also means, again, this is sort of meta contextual. If those cards start seeing play more, if more people start picking up those counter cards to a deck like this, it does end up much, much worse. That's real. However, the power that it is able to bring to bear right now in this specific context makes it my number one choice if you want to play something that isn't Loki right now. Kitty Pryde is an immensely powerful card in everything leveraging Thena and Angela, and this deck, of course, is leveraging Thena and Angela. I realize there's a contingent of my comments that'll be like, Cam, what are you talking about? This is just a Thena Angela mid-range deck. And it's like, kind of, but also this actually does sort of synergize with Thena and Angela in the sense that you very often are playing in ways that will trigger your Thena naturally. You have a lot of these one drops existing in your deck. And since you're clogging people, Angela and Thena are a natural fit as small scalers that can win those clog lanes without having to have too much investment in them, allowing Cannonball to freely win your other lanes. Kitty Pryde, obvious inclusion in a deck that is leveraging those two cards. I think a lot of people will be alternately surprised and disappointed to see Hydra Bob in here. I expect to get a lot of questions that are, replacement for Bob. If you wouldn't mind, someone timestamp this, and then everyone who asks replacement for Bob, just post the timestamp at them, please. Hydra Bob is very, very strong. If you need a replacement, I would suggest Nebula. I do not think there is a meaningful replacement for what Hydra Bob does in this deck as a 6th turn play alongside Cannonball, but I do think that you can try to get some other value out of it. You could play Nebula in here. You could even, if you wanted to be a real sicko, replace him with Loki, because it's probably impossible for that to actually be that bad. What Hydra Bob is doing here is mostly just being a 1-5. There are going to be these games where you don't draw Kitty Pryde early and you need something to play on the final turn of the game alongside, of course, our boy Cannonball. Now, this also allows you to have like some weird access to locations that you otherwise would not have access to. Between Bob and Jeff, you actually are able to get onto closed off locations fairly reasonably. This guy is just good at doing what he does. I wouldn't say he's required for the deck to function. I think Nebula is a fine replacement if that's the direction you want to go. But Nebula will only be good early, whereas Hydra Bob is much better later. So it's kind of a different dynamic when you play this deck when you don't have Hydra Bob. The more I play this deck, the more I think Titania is just kind of broken. Like, this card is so insane. Titania Green Goblin is unbelievable right now because basically as few people as have ever been playing the counters to this are playing it. And if you do a Titania Green Goblin, the game is over. You are a 10-point swing on the final turn of the game, and they have a Green Goblin, and it's over. It's just over. If you clog someone with a Titania, the game ends on the spot. What are they going to figure out another way to win another lane? It was ridiculous. When I played this deck, in order to actually get footage, I just couldn't be snapping a lot. I had to just play everything out slowly in order to actually have games when I played this deck. Because if you snap this stuff, everyone's just leaving on turn 4 the second it happens. It is legitimately crazy. And that snap profile is actually probably my biggest worry about this deck long term. This deck thrives when it is able to invest minimally in lanes and receive maximum payoff. Thena is the perfect minimal investment maximum payoff card. Very often a 2-9 or a 2-12. You are doing the things this card wants you to do all the time, no matter what. You just end up setting up situations where she is extremely large, basically for free, for doing the stuff this deck was already planning on doing. White Widow is kind of a messed up card, and there's a lot of decks right now that are doing clog sub-themes thanks to the power of White Widow and Kate Bishop. This is a deck that leans further into it than others, and a lot of that is because of the power of Titania winning a lane, cannonballing another. We saw this happen with Professor X. It's a very powerful thing to do. This card is a little bit worse of a pair with Titania, because if you have another thing in the lane, you can no longer swing the Titania back to you. Titania pairs much better with a Goblin, with an Acid Arrow, than it does with this card. But if you have an empty lane, this is a perfectly acceptable pairing with Titania, an extremely powerful thing to do. Just make sure you don't mess up your own Titania math. Angela might be the least important card in here, but everyone has her, and I can't think of anything that's a better option to her. I know the person who originally made this deck had tried to replace her with Loki to varying amounts of success. It's hard for that to be wrong. But honestly, when I was playing this, I was pretty happy with Angela, again, because this deck really wants to be able to, we have a lane that we are winning with Titania, and then how do we win the other lane? Sometimes Cannonball won't do it on its own. Sometimes this is a good way to win the Titania lane. Sometimes you're going to end up sending over the Titania with a White Widow and not being able to get her back, and you're going to need to have actual power in that lane, and Angela can be helpful in those games. She's just good. She's just a good, solid option for you to play, and I don't think I'd really look to replace her. I was very happy with Angela's performance in this list. We talked about how this deck gets a lot of value from people who are cutting Jeff in order to play this, and look, Kate Bishop is just the GOAT. Like, this card is so incredibly powerful. All I have to say to those of you who has not purchased the Kate Bishop Season Pass is you should probably do it. She is about as good as any card we have had on the Season Pass that I can remember. I think the most obvious comparison is like maybe to Hope Summers, but honestly, I think Kate Bishop is better. If you had the chance to buy Jeff the Baby Landshark on the Season Pass, you would do that 10 out of 10 times. If anyone's on the fence, I honestly think this card is better than Jeff. The best 2-drop at the slot. Incredibly powerful. Tons of synergies to build off of. One of the best cards in the game. An absolute home run. And very fun to play. Now, I don't want to knock Jeff or anything. It's not like he's bad. But Jeff is a little bit worse than Kate Bishop in nearly every situation this deck can run into. And I think that that is nowhere more easily demonstrated than by talking about the utility Kate Bishop gets in this deck versus the utility Jeff gets in this deck. In this deck, Kate Bishop is giving you either points in the form of the Pim Arrow or disruption in the form of the Acid Arrow, or even you will be able to get points out of the Hawkeye Arrow, and the Grapple Arrow can do all sorts of cool stuff in this deck, like move your Acid Arrow after the Acid Arrow goes over if you're not sure that they will be able to be clogged by the Acid Arrow. There's tons of amazing little technical things that Kate Bishop can do, and then you look at Jeff, and it's like, okay, he's pretty good. That's really all you have to say about Jeff. He's pretty good. You're an Angela deck. You like being able to get onto closed off locations. You like being able to move your power around and redistribute it on the final turn of the game. He's a good card. No one's going to sit here and be like, oh, he's not a good card. But that's kind of all he is. Whereas Kate Bishop is really hooking into your game plan with those arrows a lot of the time. Green Goblin. Now, without Professor X in the metagame right now, we need to be a heavier clog deck. And that means relying on things like Goblin and Debris and Titania and all the other ancillary clog we have to simulate having a Professor X. The closest I have come to feeling like I am Prof X cannonballing something is Titania Goblin cannonballing something. It is so unbelievably strong, and you are so often able to lock down a lane on turn 4 in a way that is absolutely unrecoverable for your opponent, and then guarantee that you're gonna win another lane thanks to the existence of Cannonball. Instead of just being able to free roll Professor X the way that we used to be able to in decks like this, which allowed us to play a lot more reasonable point stuff like Old Mockingbird, Mysterio, Ravona, we don't get the option to do that anymore because we are making up Professor X's impact through volume. We are moneyballing it, basically. We can't replace Professor X, but we can replace him in the aggregate with like 3 other cards, and that is what this deck is attempting to accomplish. Some of the time, you send over a Titania, but your lane is too full for you to get the Titania back. In those situations, Sage is your biggest unit of all time. She's also sometimes your sort of backup cannonball. Like, okay, I wasn't able to pull off everything, but I have this one lane that I'm going to win by clog, and this other lane that I'm just going to put a bunch of points in, and Sage is like 12 in it, and I'm just going to win that way. So she is filling 2 roles here. She is supplementing your sort of more clunky clog game plans where like you have 1 spot left in a lane and you're just like, I need 12 points. I'm not getting the Titania back. I just got to go over the top of it. And then she is also going to be your backup cannonball to make sure that you have some sort of, reasonable way to win when you don't draw that guy. Debris is part of our aggregate replacement for Professor X package, and really that is fundamentally what this deck is trying to do. It's trying to moneyball its way to the same outcomes as the old Prof X Thena deck, and say, like, look, we can't be that. Professor X like that doesn't exist anymore, but what we can do is execute like 95% of that game plan in a situation where our opponents are no longer prepared for it. And for that reason, Debris is an important piece of this deck. You are getting a lot of value out of clogging your opponent. You are able to put your opponent in situations where they just aren't sure where the next clog is going to come from. And I do think that that is worth talking about because when you do run into someone who's playing Jeff or Nocturne or Kitty Pryde, you have to be really on point in terms of what lanes are they going to fill up, how am I going to get a situation where I can guarantee a win here? Because without that kind of thought process, a smart player will be able to outdo you. Debris is helpful in that she covers two of those options. We all remember how good this guy was. And I mean, spoiler alert, he is still that damn good. This card is bonkers when you are able to guarantee that you have won another lane. There are very few cards that reach this guy's level of output when you are in those situations. This deck is about setting Cannonball up to succeed, and it does that better than anything has since Professor X's nerf. The only thing that you really have to worry about with this card is going to be the card Alioth. Alioth beats the crap out of this guy. There's really not much else to say. Alioth is really bad for anyone relying on Cannonball. This was true even when Cannonball was the meta, and now that he's not the meta, and like every RSM deck runs Alioth, you end up in situations where you just have to be like, I'm going to call it. I'm going to say they don't have Alioth, and I'm just going to go in on this. And sometimes you will be wrong because that's life. This is an unbelievable card with a very clearly defined weakness. That is the card Alioth. And you should be able to deal with that most of the time, but you should also be very aware that your game plan is vulnerable to everyone's least favorite purple fart cloud. All right, y'all, thank you so much for sticking with me on this video. I wanted explicitly with this one to give the people who hate all the Loki videos I'm making something to play. I am a little bit frustrated that it ends up being like, so sort of prohibitively expensive, but I'm hoping that this gets people thinking about what's actually good into Loki in a meaningful way. Because right now, I feel like Loki is probably the best card in the game, but I also feel like there are real ways to beat it. There are real ways to approach that matchup that are meaningful. And I know that people are kind of getting sick of me playing, here's the mid-range Loki deck that I'm playing today. So, suck it. It's a mid-range deck, but it's Thena instead of Loki. Ha! Get got, commenters. As always, I've been KM Best. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one. Let's get into the gameplay. Just finished season 3 of The Bear. Brutal, but beautiful. Interesting. The soreness is generally kind of nice, yeah. Do I just snap this? Oh wait, I don't have untapped up. Dude, I almost want to pass. Yikers! Yikers! Oh my. Oh my. You gotta hate that one. You gotta hate that if you're an opponent of mine. How am I possibly losing this? I don't think I am. Holy shit, we actually drew Kitty Pride? We're going crazy. I have the Cortez variant, but this one has, like, emotional resonance. So I think we've got to get the emotional resonance one. I don't really think we got a choice. Quinjet not on cloning vats is kind of interesting. Can't say I understand that one. Hydra Bob replacement? I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty comfortable just doing this the entire time. I feel you. I feel like they've lost. Yeah, like, we have 30 on the left, dude. I don't think you're gonna be swinging that, my man. Yeah, 36. I think that probably was the move. Fina in the right lane, clog something else. Bob replacement. Incredibly helpful. I have no idea what could be happening here. Solid. Place cards in it. Silly to be butthurt about a question that you can answer by asking yourself, what are some other cards that go cost one and have a large stat line? All right, I mean, I agree with you as long as you promise not to be butthurt about this. We'll see you in 10 minutes if you are living up to your ideals. I can't ever snap. Oh my god. We have Goblin into Titania Goblin? That's insane. Nico Demon? Bounce. This doesn't seem like a good matchup. Am I coping with Morph instead of Sage? Probably not full coping. If I get clawed here, I quit the game. Okay, I did not get clawed here. I think they're literally doing that with a few upcoming cards. It just seems like it's probably not worth doing it, right? Like, how are you going to make money on those cards? I could lose this game now. Or I could win it. Check out the Thena proc. Check out the Thena proc! Oh, thank fuck. Oh, thank fuck. We almost played that kitty and lost. Timmy Tama, my favorite yapping snap creator. Thank you, dude. I appreciate that. It was odd from our opponent. It wasn't that odd. They wanted to keep drawing cards, so they didn't want to play middle. Jesus Christ. Alright, things are getting weird. Holy shit, dude. That's a lot of hits. Yeah, we aren't winning that middle, I can tell you that much. Hydration Robert, on the other hand, is just clutching the fuck up over here. Hydration Robert just hard clutching that game. Oh, a deck like this makes more sense again, because you're no longer, like, investing in shit that gets you obliterated. Agent 00N7, thank you for the resub at 13 months. Inching closer to 300, which is crazy. They got my goblin. I got their Iron Man. Ooh, who came out ahead of me? Probably me. I need to draw 1 here. That's not a 1. I gave them the fucking raft, too. Gross. No, we'll probably have power here, but we're not sure how much. Oh my god, we got him. So this is dead Cassandra probably, but if not dead Cassandra, then we win. And then we add 6 to the middle going to 9, so we beat Blue Marvel. That's where my head is at. Still fine with this. We definitely lose that left lane. But we are going to win on the Athena proc mid. Still okay with... I'm not sure if I should celebrate a year of full-time or a year of releasing a video every day. LDS, MODOK, Stature, and that was the spotlight for that, correct? See, I feel like I should get that, you know what I mean? I don't really know what I'm supposed to do here, but it's probably become immune to Iron Man middle. Like, I couldn't snap